Hi everybody, Drew here. Hope everybody's having a wonderful Monday. And welcome to a special episode of the Neurotic Knitter podcast. It's good to be back with you all. I just want to say at the top that I have a podcast with my good friend Cassie Monksgard, which is called Knit About It, which you can also find here on YouTube. And Cassie and I are a little bit overdue for an updated podcast in the future, so stay tuned. We'll have one of those coming for you shortly. But if you haven't been following us on Knit About It, there's some good podcasts to catch up on. So, and as for the Neurotic Knitter, I've kind of decided that Knit About It's going to be like my primary fiber focused podcast, but then there are some special episodes that I might put up on the Neurotic Knitter, which was my original podcast that I launched, I think, sometime in maybe 2018. And I'm not great about updating it, as many of you know, but here's a new episode, surprise. So I wanted to begin today to let you know what the topic is, and the topic is the men's knitting retreat. And you're catching me in just excellent spirits. I came home yesterday from the men's knitting retreat, and I'm definitely experiencing just a beautiful afterglow from that event. I really had such a phenomenal time this time. And so I thought it might be good just to share a little bit about what the retreat is and how it started and why I go and what my experience is like, what other people's experiences may be like, and just to talk a little bit about it. So I will also note at the front of the podcast that this is not an official Men's Knitting Retreats Inc. sponsored podcast, so these views and experiences are my own, and that's actually pretty indicative of the Men's Knitting Retreats in total, which I'll share in a moment. It's kind of, you get what you want out of it, which is really nice. So anyway, let's start at the very beginning. So the Men's Knitting Retreats were founded in the early 2000s. I don't know the exact year. Joe Wilcox would know. I think it was sometime around maybe 2009, so maybe later in the 2000s. But in any event, like I think one thing that I would mention, and I think it might be obvious, but perhaps not to folks in who are outside of the knitting community, is that men are really a minority in knitting and crafting in a lot of ways. And my experience, and this hasn't been bad, it's just been what it is really, is for many years I was the only male knitter in a lot of the groups and circles that I had been a part of. And that wasn't new for me. I think a lot of gay men and bisexual men and trans men are used to kind of being like a solo guy in a friend group with a lot of women. So that was definitely my experience before going to the men's knitting retreat. And so I guess fast forward, well, yeah, this is going to be like a little bit of a train of thought. And those of you who are not new know that this is just my style of recording a podcast. So let me talk next a little bit about how I entered into the retreats, and then maybe I'll backtrack a little bit and talk a little bit more about the retreats just in general. So when I moved to Arkansas in 2015, there really was not a good fiber community locally. Objective fact from my experience. I just didn't have really good connections of really any form there. And there was not really a very vibrant like sit and knit or even like local yarn shop culture there. It really was pretty bleak. I don't know what the right word is, but so I really got a lot more out of kind of my online interactions during that time. I actually started watching a lot of podcasts kind of on my own, like Sweet Tea No Shade at that time was going on, and Bakery Bears and Smells Like Yarn from Ross. And so those really helped me feel connected. I also started to invest a lot more into just like online friendships with other knitters, including one of my best gal pals, Cassie, who I do the podcast with, who I met online. But anyway, because male knitters are kind of few and far between in our local communities, a lot of times we're lucky if there's like maybe a dozen of us. If you're in big cities, maybe a little bit more, but so I connected with a lot of the men online, a lot of male knitters online, and it's kind of a snowball effect, right? Like the algorithms, they suggest things to us, and long story short, I started developing friendships with so many it's really accomplished and interesting and super sweet and just all around great male knitters. And I think it may have been Hayes Russick, who's a male knitter, and if you're in the knitting community, you might know Hayes. He's very extroverted and he knows everybody. He's very social, and I think he was the one that first mentioned it to me. And then after that, I connected with Joe Wilcox, who has organized the retreat since the beginning, at least the one at Easton Mountain, and decided to give it a go in 2019. So that was the year before the pandemic hit. And it was just a great experience the first time around in 2019. So that's how I got plugged into it. A little bit about the retreats in general. So, and I'm not a scientist and I'm not like a retreats expert, but just a few things. One is they occur all across the country. There are retreats in at least Seattle, Washington in September, usually Michigan at some point. I think it's usually in November in Michigan. North Carolina, also in the fall, I think. And then 2 at Easton Mountain, 1 in May and 1 in September. Registration for September Easton Mountain Retreat is open, and there's still a few spots available, so you should check that out if you are a male knitter and interested in that sort of thing. And then sometimes there are, Rocky Mountain, that's one that happens in February in Colorado. And then sometimes there's a retreat in Canada, because we've got we've actually got many Canadian knitters who just come on with us, we're all one big community here in North America. So, and we even have people who come from abroad. Like there was a gentleman who was at the retreat that I was just at, who comes from Germany every year, and it's a big deal for him to travel to the States and be with the fiber guys. So that's just a little bit about it. So my experience this year was just great. I arrived on Wednesday. So one thing to know about the men's knitting retreats is that the official kind of programming begins on Thursday and runs through Sunday. But at least with Easton Mountain and the North Spring knitting retreat that just happened in May, and also the one in the fall at Easton Mountain, you can come early. You can come as early as Monday, and many guys do, and basically you're spending then a whole week, and those first few days are unstructured. So you pay a small amount of money to get your room, and they feed you, you get meals and things, but there's no official programming going on. And so it's really just a lot of unstructured time and just knitting and fellowship and hanging out, relaxing, and knitting, which is what we like to do. So then so I arrived on Wednesday. That was really wonderful. My roommate this time was Mac, who I met at the first retreat that I attended in 2019, and just a generally wonderful human being, introverted in many ways like me, also from Michigan like me. So just a wonderful person, and so excited that I had the opportunity to room with him this year. Could not have asked for a better roommate. So, and that's part of the fun too. You can kind of decide like what kind of room you want. They've got single rooms and double rooms and triples and quads, and it depends on what you want to spend to the rooms with higher occupancy or maybe a little bit less expensive. And, you know, you can think about what kind of experience you might like to have. And some people really want the solo room, you know, so it's really up to you. And so Wednesday was really just kind of mostly unstructured time. Thursday, everybody started arriving. So that was really exciting. Most people arrive in the afternoon on Thursday when they come for that portion. And so Thursday brought all kinds of new faces. One of the things that was really, I think, kind of unique about this year's experience is we had a pretty good number of new newbies, like people who had never been to a men's knitting retreat before. I think there's something like 9 out of about 30, I think it was 34 total guys that we had. So that was really cool. It was a good mixture of, and from my experience, it was a good mixture of being able to reconnect with people that I've met before and, you know, I've chatted with through Instagram and other venues over the years. But then also just people I had never met before, you know, and people who, some of them even just learned about the retreat through like a Facebook ad post or, you know, something, Googling men's knitting retreats, you know. So I think we like to think that we all know all of the fiber guys and that we're all so well connected on, on Instagram and Facebook, but come to find out there are tons of other people who are searching for this kind of a community. So I think that just tells you like how important it is for something like this to exist for men. And yeah, so in terms of the experience, so people arrive on Thursday. Thursday evening, we just have kind of an intro session and go over kind of how the conference will go or the retreat will go, and just some of the rules over at Easton Mountain, that sort of thing, kind of get acclimated. And then on Friday and Saturday, there's some really great programming that happens. There are classes, and the classes are taught by retreat members. And each year, Joe or somebody else, whoever's facilitating the retreat, will ask folks to, essentially ask people if they're interested in classes, like what they would like to learn, and then essentially members of the retreat will volunteer to teach. And this time it was a whole range of things, everything from drop spindling, weaving, brioche knitting, sock knitting. Somebody taught a class on Portuguese knitting. There was a crochet harness class, which was kind of cool, and it was very popular. So it's really fun. And related to that, I think the other thing that I think is really neat about this retreat is that it's really kind of a choose your own adventure experience. There's not any pressure to take every class. You could go and take a class during every time slot that it was available. You could take no classes depending upon what your priorities are, and you could change that year to year. Like, I think the first year I went, I took 2 classes. This year I was scheduled to take 3 classes, but I only took 2 because I kind of wanted to have a little bit of kind of free time available to me on Saturday, because I was just a little tired and wanting some social knitting. And that's really the vibe of the whole thing. It's very much a choose your own adventure, opt-in kind of experience. And, you know, I think that's really cool. There's not a lot of pressure to run yourself ragged, and that's kind of nice during a like a vacation and a time away, right? You're trying to be restored. So it's empowering to be able to have that kind of flexibility and autonomy. A few other things that I want to say about just the retreat in general, and then I want to talk a little bit about this year's experience. So first thing is, I think it's so incredible to have a space that is just for men. I think that's maybe controversial or spicy to say, but I'm just speaking from my own experience, and maybe I'll share like a little bit more about my own experience here because I think it's pertinent. For many years, especially when I was in high school, I didn't really have a lot of male friends because I'm not somebody who can pass as straight. And when I was in high school, I was bullied like crazy, and I really did not have any male friends. You know, I think I may have had one who like kind of was friends with me sometimes, but most of my friends were female, and that still continues to be true. And I don't like dislike that. I actually think that's beautiful, and I don't have a problem with that at all. But I think what's so cool about this retreat to me is it has provided an opportunity to develop friendships with other men and male knitters. So we already have kind of our fiber folks. It's not just knitting. I keep saying knitting, but realizing when I say knitting, I'm meaning all fiber arts: knitting, weaving, spinning, crochet, anything, not just knitting. So we already have common interests, which is good. And in being an introvert, it's nice because it kind of gives you like a glide path to conversation, because like one of the things I hate the most about meeting new people is small talk. I just don't really like it, and I'm not very good at it. I try really hard, so hope maybe people think I'm good at it, but I don't think most people realize that it's like a real effort for me. But having the male only space is just so nice. I mean, I think a lot of times in knitting, especially if you're the solo guy in an all-female environment, you know, the conversations sometimes go into territory that you're just like, I don't have anything to offer here. I always listen politely, of course, but you know, there's something really nice about having that element of it. The other thing that I really like about it is there's a great diversity in the life experiences and ages and geographies and backgrounds of all the attendees. So I would say Joe could help me with this, but I think I'm probably in the bottom 20% or the youngest 20% of, or maybe even youngest 10% of retreaters, and I'll be 40 on Thursday. So there are a lot of guys, I think, in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, 70s, and 80s even. So not only is it an experience where you can connect with other men, but you have this beautiful kind of multi-generational experience where everybody's together. And for me, I feel that, this is going to sound sappy, but I really mean it. It means an awful lot to me to be able to interact with some of the older men who are in lots of ways role models for folks like me. You know, I think having positive, well-adjusted, happy, and fulfilled men who attend this retreat, and then you get to interact with them and talk with them, I just find that's really kind of one of my most favorite parts. I told somebody this while I was at the retreat, is all of the people who attend are so interesting. Like, I just feel like I learn a ton. And just to give you a sense of like the kinds of people who come, I mean, you have people who are like web designers, professors, members of the clergy, people who are teachers, people who are artists. Like, it's just a very business people, lawyers. I mean, it's just like a whole range of, you know, people who are retired, of course. there's a whole range of people, and from all over the country and the world, as I mentioned before. So all over the US. I mean, obviously, since it's in New York, it draws, a lot from the Northeast and from Canada, but we've got folks coming from all over, from the West Coast and everywhere in between. So it's very, very cool. The other thing that I want to just make sure that I mention too is it is a retreat for anybody who identifies as male. So for folks who are trans men, they're welcome, and several trans men attend. Non-binary men, whatever you want to, whatever kind of identity you hold, if you are male identifying, you are welcome to be a part of the retreat. And it's also true kind of across like sexual orientation. Like, it's not just gay men. There are straight men and bi men and all kinds of different identities. So it's very cool in that regard. So I just felt such warmth after the retreat. I just had such a nice experience, and I wanted to share a little bit about it with you. So, I mean, just a couple more things. I took a drop spindling class with Erin. It was really great. I'm not sure if drop spindling will stick with me, but I really enjoyed the opportunity to try something new. I took a mini jumpers class with Greg. So the mini jumpers, this is a pattern from the UK, hence jumpers, but essentially we learned how to make tiny little holiday sweaters that you would then string along a bunting. And a bunting's like, I have one above my yarn wall, which I can't show you. You can actually see it. Like, see how I've got this little flag? That's what a bunting is. But anyway, Greg made this during COVID. He learned how to do these sweaters and wanted to teach all of us. And so I'm excited. I definitely will follow through on that. And then I was signed up for a color work class, but that was the one I kind of took a pass on just because I needed a little bit of a breather. Trying to think of what else I would want to say. It's just a great experience, beyond welcoming. Another thing that I really like about it that I think is super special is it's not cliquey. And certainly, like, as is the case in any big group, you're going to have people that you're closer to. So that does happen, right? Like, you have friends who are you're a little closer with and you hang out with, the kind of your little group. But the thing that Joe always says that I just absolutely love is that any convening that's happening or any little group that's happening, everybody's welcome to be a part of. So if you see a bunch of people and they're like all hanging out around a loom and somebody's showing something, like, you're welcome just to kind of go over and say hi and introduce yourself. And that's every aspect of everything. If two people are going to go off and walk on a hike, you can, ask to join them. And in basically every case, you're going to be invited to come along. Meals, like, it's not cliquey. There's no like weird high school lunch table thing. Like, everybody changes it up all the time. And so I think maybe that's a good way to maybe end, which is I'm now back in the real world after 4 or 5 days of essentially getting opportunities to talk with and meet with basically all of the 33 other retreat attendees, who are all so unique and cool and just accomplished and in knitting and in other ways in life. And just such a good use of time, really, really and truly. And so the two messages that I would end with, at least two, you know me, I always like to do 2 and then 3 and then 4, but is, if you're a guy and you've been, or you're male identifying and you are interested in one of these retreats and you have any kind of reservation, you should do it. I have at least a handful, like 5 guys that I know that I think in my mind, like, this would be perfect for them. But really anybody, anybody male identifying is welcome to do 10, and you should try it. Don't be scared. You might be nervous for the first few minutes, but like, you won't be nervous for long. You will be welcomed with open arms. And then the second thing is kind of a more global thing, which is, and it's just something I'm thinking a lot about as I like have my milestone birthday on Thursday. And I know it's not, 40, everybody's like, that's not that old. But I am kind of in a transition in life. I feel like mid-20s, like early 20s, mid-20s, and 30s were really focused on career, on advancement, on moving, on getting established. And what I'm finding is that each year that passes, I seem to enjoy more and more. And maybe that's just kind of like the accumulation of wisdom and confidence and sense of self and kind of comfort with who I am. But I'm excited to have a life. I'm excited about my life right now and kind of the direction it's heading, where I'm making sure that there's a good balance of work, of course, which I have a wonderful job, very rewarding and meaningful to me, and that I really like, but also time for things that bring me joy outside of life or outside of work. And that's everything from health and wellness, exercise, time to nurture my relationship with my partner, time to do things like this, a knitting getaway, or something that, where you're investing in a passion that you have. And I think a lot of times in the US, at least, we view hobbies and leisure and rest as like optional, or something that should be wrought with guilt. Like, I'm going away for 3 days. I'm taking 3 days off of work to go to a knitting retreat. That feels very frivolous. But in my mind, it's like, this is part of having a complete life. This is part of pursuing a whole range of passions, because we're complex, and we each have all kinds of things that we like to do and things that we geek out on. And it's always so rewarding when you meet other people who share that kind of passion, like people who think that this is not strange but really cool to have, like a wall of yarn in your house, as one example. So in closing, I just want to send a huge message of total and complete gratitude to all the retreaters who I had the opportunity to meet over the weekend. I'm terrible at goodbyes. I always rush them. So like, I had the opportunity to hug many of you during breakfast on Sunday, but I don't like the goodbye process. And then there are many of you that I did not get a chance to hug, and I'm sending you a big hug right now. And I hope everybody will stay in touch. I love to chit chat. I love to stay connected during kind of the off season. So don't be a stranger, and be really good to yourself. Take care of yourself. Know that I'm here for you, and all the other guys are here for you if you ever have a time of need. And I'm sending you guys love and light. Mwah.